Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nic Kipke. I'm the Minority Leader of the House Republican Caucus. I'm joined today with Delegate Ron George from Annapolis and Delegate John Cluster from Baltimore County. We're here today to talk about a very serious issue related to the corruption scandal in state-run corrections facilities throughout the state of Maryland. This is an issue where we believe that the O'Malley-Brown administration and the Democratic leadership in the General Assembly have been negligent in addressing this problem for many years. Recently, the governor was made aware of the federal indictment while he was on an international tour in another part of the world, and it took him several days even to respond to this very serious crisis. When he finally responded, he called this a very positive achievement, and as a result of those comments, this has made national news, and quite frankly, doesn't pass the laugh test. Maryland corrections and the corruption revolving around the system is shameful, and our caucus has been working for many years to address these problems, but we have not been able to get the attention or the support of the governor nor of the Democratic leadership in our state. We believe that the time to change and fix these problems is long behind us, and we're demanding that the General Assembly and the Democratic leadership finally take the actions necessary. We have produced policies that would fix these problems once and for all in our corrections system, but they have been rejected time and time again. We're going to talk about those solutions here today. While the presidential election of 2016 might be of importance for Governor O'Malley, it's not of importance for most Americans nor most Marylanders. What most Marylanders and Americans want today is good government. They want their government to function in a way where they get the best bang for their buck in all aspects of government, and our governor has been spending his time focused on issues that will get him elected in 2016. We want to hold Governor O'Malley, our governor, accountable. The citizens of Maryland demand and ask that you, Governor, take personal responsibility for the actions that have taken place in our corrections system. You are the chief executive of this state. We ask that you stop running around the country, running for president, get back into your office, and take responsibility for the office of which you've been elected. The other aspect of this is the corruption isn't new information. We've known about this the entire time Governor O'Malley has been elected, and he's known about it. In April of 2009, it came to light that Patrick Byers, a high-ranking gang official, called out a hit on someone outside of the prison system. He called out that hit on an illegally trafficked cell phone inside the corrections system. Later in that same year, in 2009, 24 individuals were indicted, including corrections officers, corrections employees, and inmates, on operating a vast drug ring out of multiple state correctional facilities. In June of 2011, a corrections officer was convicted of smuggling cell phones in and out of the Baltimore Corrections Facility and heroin. Over the past 7 months, we have had a murder per month in each of our corrections facilities. It's the highest level since 2009. With all of this going on, the governor and the Democratic leadership in Maryland have chosen not to act. Instead, the governor and his allies have been pushing high-level political issues that are rooted in political posturing for the presidential election. Whether it's wind energy, taxes, whatever it may be, we have not been focused on the issues at hand that Maryland voters have elected Governor O'Malley and his allies in the legislature to work on. The O'Malley-Brown administration has the ultimate responsibility, and the Democratic leaders should be held accountable because they failed to act on meaningful proposals that our caucus has worked on over the past 7 years. I want to introduce Delegate Ron George and Delegate John Cluster. Both of these gentlemen have worked on very meaningful policies that would reform Maryland's corrections. Unfortunately, they have not had the support of the legislature. We're asking for the support of Marylanders. Marylanders that care about good government and a correction system that would actually produce the results that they're intended. Punishment and corrections. First up, we have Delegate Ron George to talk about a meaningful substance abuse bill that he's introduced in this legislature, but unfortunately, despite the common sense nature, has not received the support of the leadership. Delegate Ron George.
Thank you, Delegate Kipke. Delegate Ron George, I represent District 30, the Annapolis area. I introduced bills way back in 2008 and 2009 that would have created an environment which would have prevented things such as the recent Baltimore City prison scandal. My residential substance abuse treatment programs, or RSAT bills, would have redirected many of the so-called gangs, such as the Black Guerrilla Gang, in Baltimore away from their daily drug dealing and into programs that would have treated not only their substance abuse, but the inmates that they were giving the drugs to, and it would have exposed their gang activity. I proposed a solution that truly rehabilitates inmates at little cost to the state because I found federal grant money to implement it. And they apparently did not accept it because apparently the ones overseeing the inmates were just as corrupt as their inmates' original convictions. Our prisons need to be ones that rehabilitate, not ones that exacerbate the behavior. Exacerbate the behavior. Residential substance programs, substance treatment programs for correction facilities aids in the creations of substance abuse treatment plans in prisons, along with education courses, financial literacy courses, management plans for the inmate population. Gary Maynard, by the way, when there became big resistance, and especially from the Baltimore Correction Facility and others around the state, I then made it smaller into a pilot program for just Anne Arundel County to show that these programs work, and they still wouldn't accept them. Gary Maynard, the Secretary of Public Safety and Correctional Services, voiced support in a personal letter to me. I applaud all your efforts to visualize a solution to these and many other issues, and he thanked me for them. Despite recognizing this need for reform, the state leadership in the House and the governor's office refused to implement my proposals. They chose corruption over reform. Now, this isn't just happening at the Baltimore Detention Center. As you may just be hearing in the news, Michael Johnson at the Chesapeake Center, a member of the Blood Gang, has been doing similar activities. My friends, most inmates one day will be released. Shouldn't we be rehabilitating them? Governor O'Malley went so far, as Delegate Kipke said, after this was uncovered, that it was a very positive achievement. My gosh, we've known it's been going on for over 6 years. This, as you know, is not the first case, and I think you'll find Delegate Cluster also offers some solutions. We do have RSAT programs work in other states. They're supposed to be implemented in a couple jurisdictions in Maryland, and they're not being implemented. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Delegate Cluster to talk about his legislation. Delegate Cluster brought this photograph forward during this legislative session that shows high-ranking gang leaders basically running our prisons. The federal investigators who looked into this crime said the Black guerrilla family should might as well put their flag on top of the facility in Baltimore City because they have conquered it. Delegate Cluster brought forward this photo that shows the highest-ranking member of the Black guerrilla family talking on a cell phone, smoking a cigar, and wearing jewelry in prison. Oh, by the way, the photo was taken by another inmate. Delegate Cluster introduced legislation to go after this problem, but it was soundly rejected by the Democratic leadership in Annapolis. Ladies and gentlemen, Delegate Cluster.
Thank you, Delegate Kipke. As many of you, we've done interviews in the past on this issue, and Delegate Kipke's right. We had a cell phone bill in to stop the cell phones, try to stop the cell phones from going into the prisons. This year wasn't the first time this bill has been implemented. The Secretary Maynard and his crew have tried it for the last 3 or 4 years, and unfortunately it died. As a retired police officer, they brought it to me thinking maybe I might have a little more pull in the committee to try to get it through. What this bill did was twofold. Number one, in the law, there's no crime for attempting to bring in the cell phone into the jail. So we added that provision into the law. The second and most important provision of the law says that if you get caught a second time with the cell phone, you will get a 5-year consecutive sentence when you're added to your jail time. And I think this is a big deterrent. It would be a big deterrent to what's going on in prison. Imagine a guy serving a 15-year sentence for whatever the charge may be, comes up for parole in 7 years, and all of a sudden he's got a 5-year added sentence to the end of that 7 years. You think he's going to be willing to take that cell phone or use that cell phone in prison? I don't think so. 5 more years is a huge amount of time after you're getting ready to get out. There's a lot of reasons that I've heard both in print and on the news as to why this bill didn't pass. First off, I heard one of the delegates say that it had nothing to do with what's going on in the corruption. Well, it has absolutely everything to do with what's going on. You heard Delegate Kipke talk about the hit that was ordered from court. Mr. Lacko was in our district, right along Route 7. He was murdered. The hit came from Baltimore City. It came from an illegal cell phone in jail. So it has a lot to do with it. The second and more important was we've heard that there's no prosecutions of these cases. That's why this bill didn't make it through, because we're not prosecuting the cases. In your packet today, you're going to get a list that I've done over the last 4 years of charges that have been charged in the Baltimore City Corrections and also throughout the state. The biggest one was in 2011. There were 254 total people charged with cell phones, whether it be corrections officers, people trying to bring them into the jail, or the inmates themselves. Out of that, 130 of them were guilty. In 2010, just in Baltimore City alone, there were 145 charged. There's also a breakdown throughout the rest of the state, where these charges occur. And that's something that we really need to look at, because the numbers are really low for the rest of the state. As we saw reported today, you have a problem in Howard County. Well, I got a phone call yesterday about noon that told me that in Western Maryland, the problem may be as big or bigger than what we have in the Baltimore City Corrections Facility. I think what we need to do is have Secretary Maynard, if he hasn't already done so, expand his investigation and throughout every facility that we have in the state of Maryland. And I'm calling for him to do that because it's really important. The last thing is we've got to get this kind of legislation passed. This year seems to be, that we just went through, seems there was I don't know, it's like we were looking after the criminals more than we were looking after the people and the citizens in the state of Maryland. We had bills in to shield records from the business owners of criminal records. We had bills in to expunge records. We had bills in to decriminalize marijuana. We had bills in to give a ticket instead of locking somebody up that had possession of marijuana. I think what this legislature and the Democratic leadership down here needs to do is we need to start looking out for the citizens of Maryland instead of looking out for the criminal element, and that's something we're not doing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back over to Delegate Kipke, and we'll take some questions after that.
The most important point we want to make is that we care about Marylanders. We care about our state, and we want to make sure that we're doing our jobs as the minority party in Annapolis to hold our administration and Democratic leaders accountable. They have failed the citizens of Maryland by failing to address the problems in our correction system. We are bringing to light today that this isn't isolated. This problem is a vast corruption scandal that spreads beyond just Baltimore City in most of our institutions around the state that are run by the State Department of Corrections. If Governor O'Malley had the will to address this problem, it would be fixed, but he has neglected it and ignored it throughout his entire term as governor. Just the other day he mentioned that this is a problem that he inherited. Well, again, it doesn't pass the laugh test. You've been governor now for 7 years, Governor O'Malley. The time to act is now. It's your responsibility, and the citizens of Maryland demand that you take that responsibility serious. We're going to be introducing legislation in the next session of this General Assembly, and we're asking Maryland citizens to get involved with us. We need your help to hold Democratic leaders and Governor O'Malley accountable. It's unacceptable that people, especially corrections officers, are being allowed in our corrections facilities even though they're known gang members. It's unacceptable that these individuals are trafficking drugs in and out of our corrections system. It's also unacceptable that they're trafficking cell phones to these inmates. We need to have these policies in place as Maryland law. Please support Delegate Custer and Delegate Ron George in their attempts to improve and reform Maryland correction systems. And finally, we ask that the governor implement and demand a full audit of the entire corrections system in Maryland. This problem is not isolated to Baltimore City. It needs to be addressed in all aspects of corrections. Marylanders deserve it. The good corrections officers who are doing the job that we've hired them to do deserve to work in a safe environment, and it's time for the governor and the Democratic leadership of Maryland to take action. Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate your interest in this story, and we look forward to answering any of your questions.
In light of all these allegations that have been going on, how do you guys feel about the handling of Secretary Maynard by the governor?
There's an investigation going in relation to Secretary Maynard. Many of the answers that we're asking for have yet to been answered, and we're going to hold judgment. We are asking him for a full briefing for the entire caucus. We had hoped to have a full briefing in the Judiciary and Judicial Proceedings Committee, but I believe for political reasons that was canceled, And now there's going to be a meeting next month of the higher ranking members of the General Assembly. That's political cover, folks. That's what that's about. That's not about getting real answers to this problem and exposing the corruption that needs to be reformed. So we're asking that Secretary Maynard come before the House Republican caucus in the very near future to answer the questions that we have so that we can help develop a plan to reform the system.
And if I could say, I'm not defending Secretary Maynard, but, as a police officer, a lot of times we had to go outside the agency to do an investigation. If you can't trust the people around you, you can't do your own investigation. And if he in fact did what he said he did a year and a half ago, reached out to outside agencies to come in and do an investigation, that was the right thing to do. I mean, I really believe that was the right thing to do. If that hadn't been done, we wouldn't be here today finding out what's going on. So until we get all the answers, like Delegate Kipke says, it's easier to fire somebody. But when you fire them, you can't get any more answers out of them. So I think we need to find out the full story. This investigation is far from being done, and once we get the full story, then we'll make that determination as a caucus whether we're going to call for his resignation or we think he should stay on.
When you talk about a full audit, will you go into that a little bit more? I mean, who would do it, and what would they have to look for?
Well, one of the major things that we think needs to happen immediately is when corrections officers enter state facilities, they need to be frisked by another agency. Why not use the state police? Right now, we don't know who the good guys are the bad guys in terms of corrections officers. We assume that most corrections officers are good people doing a good job, but we know there's an element that is assisting the gangs in our prisons. We need to have creative measures that are simple. Bring in an outside law enforcement agency to frisk these people to make sure they're not trafficking heroin, they're not trafficking weapons, and they're not trafficking cell phones.
I wonder, Delegate Cluster, if you could talk about this picture, what it symbolizes to you, why it's important.
Well, this picture was brought to me by the federal prosecutors. It was involved in another case that they had, but it just proves what goes on, what's going on in the system. As Delegate Kipke says, we have two gang members on here. One of them's on a cell phone with a cigar in his mouth, with jewelry around, his neck, with a ring on. He's not supposed to have any of this. This is, this is forbidden. And as Delegate Kipke said, this picture is being taken from another cell phone. So you got two cell phones involved here, and it's blatant. I mean, if the guards are not finding this, what are they finding, or the correctional officers? I think Delegate Kipke is right on point. We need an outside agency right now to take over the gates of the correctional facilities and search the people that are coming in there, because right now you don't know who you can trust, and you're just not sure who's the good guys and who the bad guys are.
I think it would behoove the governor to appoint truly an independent audit to be done. I'm sorry. It would behoove the governor to make sure it's an independent audit and remove himself from it and let them do their work. It has to be nonpartisan, non-political.
Right, in your package, you will get a list of the breakdown that we've done for all of the convictions, and it breaks it down as to everything for the last since 2009. This is the best we could put together with the information we got. It came from the Department of Corrections, and also you will get a copy of this photograph along with the press release.
I'd lastly like to encourage members of the press with us to request that the Memorandum of Understanding between the FBI and the state of Maryland, we're asking for a copy of that Memorandum of Understanding. We believe that the governor is purely politically posturing, and as a result, it's costing Marylanders greatly. This Memorandum of Understanding will explain the relationship between the federal investigation and the state of Maryland. We've been having a very difficult time getting a copy of this, and we believe it might expose more details towards regarding this scandal that Marylanders deserve to know about.
Can you tell us what you know about the new case that came up about, is it Michael Johnson?
We're hearing what you're hearing. We just read it, and I just read it in the paper today. That's the first time we've heard of it. So no, we have no further information. Again, this is an ongoing investigation. I'm sure this is not going to be the last time that we're going to find one of the correctional institutions is having a problem. That's why we're asking that they expand this investigation throughout the entire state of Maryland to every corrections that is run by the state of Maryland.
There's no doubt that this Michael Johnson is a member of the blood gang and that he is doing many of the same activities that we're talking about. But I think these next couple of weeks will uncover much of it.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you all very much. This concludes our press conference.